Thank you. What did you calling me that?
That's all here.
I see deer I know. You remember that guy?
That was a really big deal. I had to look at where it's at. Jack, I think we're ready to go.
No, there are.
Jack, I think we're ready to go. It's after 4. Yeah.
Okay.
I'd like to call the meeting to order if I could, please. We want to welcome everyone to our meeting here in the Community Center, August 19, Board of Light and Power. We have an agenda set and we will do our best to follow that. We start with a call to order. And now, roll call.
Director Crum?
Here.
Director Key? Here. Director Nasser?
Here.
Director Willerow?
Here.
Chairperson Span?
Here. We'll now go through approve the meeting agenda, which includes consent agenda and other agenda items and additions or deletions. What's your pleasure?
I'll make the motion.
Comments or questions? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Approved. Consent agenda.
I'll make the motion.
Comments or questions from anyone?
Just a couple comments. Again, these are the balance sheet and the income statement for 1 month. So it's July, the first month of the new fiscal year. In my general manager report, I point out a couple things, but first thing is some of the changes in the expenses. You can see that our renewable purchases July over July are actually up 34%. So we're phasing in really the first segment of the solar installation, and it represents almost 30+% of our sales or our renewable energy portfolio at this point in time. So significant element of renewable coming online this year, and you could, as we were reporting month by month, it was kind of hard to see that because we were phasing it in. But 1 month, July over July, that solar is really coming in. It is a bit higher price. So, and it also, July, the short-term purchases that we're making are up substantially. So if you aren't following the market and you aren't seeing what's happening, our unhedged short-term supply is substantially ahead of prices. We did also go out to the market for some short-term purchases in the last month that were monthly, so those don't typically go before you. And just to report on those, that the actual for the next 12 months, the highest cost power that we're purchasing in our hedges are in January and February. So a bit of changes that are occurring in the marketplace. It's a bit different than what we're used to, and it's primarily reflected on that increased amounts of solar that's coming in. So I think you're going to see prices shifting as a result of that. And it's important to kind of stay on top and watch those reports that we're getting. The other thing that's interesting is on the load side, as COVID approached, we had a lot of increased residential sales, which are incrementally a bit higher than our commercial industrial sales. And that drove our average cost of power that our customers were paying up. The reverse is happening now. Those the residential loads were actually down substantially in July. And the industrial and commercial, large commercial industrial loads were up quite a bit July over July. So it's substantially changing the mix when you compare month to month. I'd encourage you all to look at the sales dashboard and the financial statements and see some of that. But we are seeing some significant changes, year over year in that. And it's not entirely consistent with the budget, by the way, also. So you might want to look at the budget variances as well. And keep an eye on that going forward.
Okay, Larry?
Question. Of the rate changes that we implemented July 1, do you think they have impacted these numbers at all?
Yeah, well, if you look at it, where you can see that is you look at the, if you want to pull it up here, every month you get a sales and a purchase power dashboard. So the sales dashboard, if you look at that, two more pages. There's the power supply dashboard. There's the sales dashboard on the top page. This is the month over month comparison for July over July. It's only 1 month. Again, what you'll see is in future dashboards, you see this monthly, and then you see the year to date. They're the same this month because we only have 1 month in the sales. Now go down, you can see actually the overall changes in the commercial industrial sales numbers on the top. But if you go down further, keep going down. Here's where you're going to get the dollars divided by the kilowatt hours is the sales revenue per kilowatt hour. And you can see that the residential, it's 0.77% change in the dollars per kilowatt hour sold. That was a result of zero change in the rate. All right. What happened there is they used a lot less. So the fixed cost that we increased and spread it to the other area is spread over fewer kilowatt hours. So the cost per kilowatt hour on average went up. The reverse is happening in the industrial category is they're actually using that capacity that they're buying more efficiently. So their rates are actually down more than the rates that we reduced them. All right. So you're actually seeing that rate come through. But if you remember, it was on the large industrial customers, I think it was about 2% or 3%, something like that, 2 to 3%. And now you're seeing it's almost 6.88% reduction year over year because of the fact that they're also using more power and using about the same amount of demand. So their average cost per kilowatt hour for their usage is also reducing their cost. So, but if you see average over average, total system over total system, our cost per kilowatt hour was down 3.1% in 1 month. July over July.
The municipal category, that's street lighting, right?
No, street lighting is down further. That's an independent category, and municipal is water, wastewater, municipal buildings. All of those individual counts combined, all of the sales to the city and townships, direct sales to them, not street lighting sales, but direct retail sales, water and wastewater plant.
At one time, wasn't the sewage in a different category than the water?
They are on a different rate, but their classification is the same. They're municipal sales. So what you're seeing in the industrial category here is multiple rates combining together for industrial usage. Same thing for the municipal category. All of the municipal buildings aren't on the same rate, although this is an aggregate sum of all of the sales to those municipal customers. Does that make sense?
Anyone else have any comments or questions on 3? All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. We're down to number 4, public comment. We have it set up here. Introduce yourself and take it away.
Good afternoon. My name is Brendan Thomas, 1756 Beach Hill Drive. So, DOP management, polluting the climate, destroying the environment. the coal plant for decades. You took down a coal burning generation facility and you tried to replace it with another fossil fuel burning plant. All this despite knowing the climate science. You asked your grandkids and future generations to accept a lesser future. Does that not bother any of you? Shame on you. You then disingenuously greenwashed this proposed methane plant by touting its supposed climate benefits. Shame on you again. You then had a natural gas consulting and engineering firm recommend a natural gas plant, and you claimed that was an independent analysis. Shame on you again. Instead of allocating funds for energy efficiency or benefiting any of your ratepayers with their payments, you self-servingly proposed a new office facility on Harbor Island with a water view. Shame on you again. You thought the good old boys on your board and the city council would just pass this along without adequate public consultation, without questions. Shame on you again. Taken together, these actions have broken the trust with this community. Your leadership is devoid of ethics. Because of this broken trust, the community has its eyes laser focused on your actions. Stating in your press release yesterday that you will potentially remove the local power generation component of the bond is nowhere near good enough. A good start would be to revoke your air pollution permit that you submitted. That would be an action that'd be appropriate of the community's voice. And should your ongoing plans and your new notice of intent include climate destroying generation facilities or anything else that deviates from a sustainable energy transition, you won't just have 15 local youth up here criticizing your proposal. I can guarantee you will have 50. So, BOP management, you have a choice. You can listen to the voice of the community and embrace a sustainable energy transition. Or you can face an even angrier public than the one you have already betrayed. Choose wisely.
Okay, next.
My glasses defog here. My name is Jeffrey Miller. I live at 1120 South Harbor Drive. I'm both a resident of Grand Haven and a BLP customer. First, I'd like to thank the Board of Light and Power for having these meetings here in a public forum while Zoom was a necessity during the pandemic, and hopefully the Delta variant won't take control of our lives for a second time. It is good to have these public meetings where one can meet face to face. Zoom does provide a nice alternative, but it doesn't do public meetings or town hall gatherings justice. Secondly, I'd like to thank Jack Smant and John Masser for their years of service. Unfortunately, I won't be able to attend probably the next 2 meetings, and by that time, you folks will have turned out. But I'd like to thank you for all of your time and effort that you have spent these many days, weeks, months, and years, not only on this project, but on others. So thank you very much for your service. Third, I want to dispel the rumor that I am gunga din, though I did earn it, the reputation last week when I provided water for both Jan and Dave at the town hall debates. But I did serve another purpose while I was out in the hallway, and that I was sort of like the unofficial greeter. I gave out my own personal unused masks for everybody, and also sort of did a head count. And I also have Councilman Dora to thank for that, because we sort of conferred with our numbers. So just for the record, or with a very close approximation, the town hall meeting on the 9th had 142 people in attendance, and the town hall meeting on the 11th had 88 people. With regard to some other metrics, I just wanted to let you know that again, the Grand Haven Energy Organization did collect and deliver to City Council 2 weeks ago, this past Monday, petitions signed by 1,100 Grand Haven city residents, with an additional 300 plus people who were Board and Light customers, but lived in either the township, Spring Lake, or Ferrysburg. And again, all of them were asking for the 3 points that were highlighted in our petition. In addition, you may have missed out on a petition that was delivered even earlier this year, when 195 Grand Haven high school students signed a petition urging City Council to develop a sustainability plan, and then asks how the power plant would fit into that program. In addition, City Council did a very good gesture by reaching out to the community with their postcards and asked for feedback. And of the feedback, 155 people did respond. And lastly, letters to the editor came in with 22 since the beginning of the year, of which 21 were against the proposal, or 17 were against the proposal, 5 were for it, and 1 was neutral. And just in closing, again, thank you for your help. And just as an aside, I too, having attended the last town hall meeting that Eagle conducted, received a notification that just yesterday the public comment period is available, and would be interested during your new business component of this meeting to find out whether it's necessary for us and the general public to start sending our comments to Eagle with regard to your air permit. So thank you. And again, Jack and John, thanks again very much.
Thank you, Jeff. Do we have anyone else who would like to speak? Okay.
Matt Davis, 209 South Third Street. First of all, I want to congratulate you on being able to change your minds. It's something that very few people seem to be able to do in our society today. The last time I spoke before this body, I mentioned my friendship with Dave Walters, and many people have said to me since then that they can't imagine how we could be friends. I think to understand that friendship, you have to begin with the fact that we're both very contentious men. And contentious men find ways to communicate with each other. I think if Dave and I published all the emails we've exchanged, we'd have the beginning of a small volume already. I think we learned something important out of it in all of our differences. I know I learned more from Dave about energy on the local level and things of that sort than I ever imagined I'd want to know. I come at this from a very different point of view. I'm writing a book on the global climate crisis, and I guess full disclosure now, I have to admit that I'm an academic, I'm a professor, I try to hide that. I tried most of all to hide my university, and this will kill me. The Ohio State University, so please forgive me. Forgive me, that's I do live in Michigan. I think what Dave and I learned together, aside from the friendship we formed, which is very real to me, I think we learned that we need one another. We all need one another. I can't tell you how much I'm trying to get my head around to write the book on the global thing, how much I'd like to bring as knowledge to share with all of you. From a very different point of view, Dave has such a vast knowledge. All of you who have served for so long have such a vast knowledge. People in the community come at this from many different points of view. And I think if we can learn to share our knowledge, we can, from this thing we've been through, perhaps begin to make Grand Haven the most environmentally conscious community in Western Michigan, which would be something to really aim for. I also want to take this opportunity to thank Dave for all the service that he's done and all the service that the board has done. You've done many wonderful things for our community, and I know you will continue to. I think all of you have. I think both Jack Smant and John Nasser have been absolutely essential men and over many years in the development of this country. And I think you deserve our warmest gratitude. I also hope that we can proceed from this point in a spirit of reconciliation. I know that in situations like this, things get said, feelings get hurt. I want to say I have not been at any conversations where anyone has said a personal thing about anyone here in my presence. Maybe they know that they shouldn't do that in my presence. I hope we can all, whatever feelings we have, move beyond them now and realize that we are all in this together, that we all need each other, and that we all have a great deal to offer each other. And I thank all of you for all the work that you've done on this matter.
Thank you very much. Anyone else wish to speak? Mr. Coffin?
Good afternoon, Andy Cochran, 50 Howard Avenue, Grand Haven, the Board of Light and Power customer, candidate for one of the seats up here. I just wanted to.
Andy, can you talk up a little?
I'll talk up. Better?
Better.
Better. So to echo another sentiment from a previous speaker, I want to thank the board and the staff of BLP for their patience, for their knowledge, for their accessibility in reconsidering this original July 2018 resolution, and compliment you again on your nimbleness and your ability to revisit a decision and change course. Congratulations. You've listened, and I think the community will be thankful for your action. So, in part B of your agenda, I hope you move forward with those ideas. Thanks again.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Peter Walters. I don't think I need this, but I was a drill sergeant. So, first of all, alternative, Grand Haven, we've got no solar. I live in Arizona for 5 months out of the year, and our solar out there is fine, but it is actually a losing proposition. By the time you clean all those solar panels 4 times a year to get the dust off, and you have to redo things, solar is actually subsidized by the federal government and by us, the SRP, which is Salt River Project. And they subsidize all that for people to have solar. It is not feasible. Even in Arizona, we have 340 days of sunlight every year. Wind here in Michigan might work, but who wants a bunch of wind towers out on Lake Michigan or on the beach or any place else? Dave Walters, I'm Pete Walters. I'm sure we're not related. I was raised Dutch Christian Reformed, and my parents were from England and the Netherlands. So I do have a cousin Dave, but just as we're not related, I don't think we are. We might be way down the line. Anyhow, my biggest question is, we're buying off the grid. What is the markup that the BLP is charging the customers of Grand Haven for that? I mean, we're getting power off the grid. We are paying for that, but we have a BLP. We have employees and everybody else. Where is that money coming from when we're buying off the grid? Are we paying a premium? Are the customers of Grand Haven and BLP paying extra money? I don't know. I'm just asking the question. I would like an answer, but you know what? And if you tell me you're buying off the grid at this price, but the price is being passed on to the customers of Grand Haven and the BLP. So I would like to know, just as a caveat, what are we actually paying? What are we paying the grid? And what are we paying as customers? Because that is the bottom line. If we don't have our own generating plant, if we don't have some, and I know the city of Grand Haven and the council has said, you know, we'll let this thing go that we passed, that the DLP has to generate so much power. But that was what sold that to the people of Grand Haven. That's what sold that. to the city council that you would generate power to replace the Sims plant. And now the city council and you guys are saying, well, we're not gonna live up to that. Or we can, you know what? That was what sold that to the general public. There was no uproar because you were gonna replace it. So, you know what? I think you have lost the trust. I'm sorry, Larry, you can look like that, but you know what? You're dead wrong. You guys supported that. You told us that was gonna happen, and you lied to the citizens of the city of Grand Haven.
Dave, you want to answer?
I don't think we need to spend time here, but I would like to get his name and I'd be happy to contact him and talk to him about how we buy power and that sort of thing. The questions that he raised, and in particular, I'll address the last point as well.
Okay. I think we have said this before. We do work under the council. Our decision to have generation was mandated by the council in a resolution. I know that there has been discussion, and one of the council members said that they would rescind it any longer that was going to happen. But that's part of the scenario we've gone through. Okay, anyone else wish to speak? Okay, we'll move on. Next item is general manager's report.
Item 5A, 1 through 7, you do have purchase orders on the agenda totaling $184,387. I think they're self-explanatory. Just want to point out that when we did add the 2 other items to the agenda, we did add 1 purchase order as well. So the last purchase order, number 7, was actually an oversight on the first agenda, and it's been added here. So just to point that out specifically, if you're looking at the old agenda, there's only 6 items. The 7th item was added after the fact. So I'd be happy, what is interesting is what you're starting to see is a change in our business model, and it also is a change in what you're approving dollars for. It used to be when I first got here, almost your entire agenda was filled with buying purchase orders relating to the power plant. If you notice, there isn't 1 purchase order for any generation on that list. And there's still some cleanup efforts in the confirming area, but I think you'll see fewer and fewer agenda items, if any, that deal with power supply going forward in that fashion. So I think it is a reflective of a business model, and you'll start seeing more and more of it.
No comments or questions? Sure.
I think maybe it'd be appropriate, Chair, to put it on the,
I'll make the motion.
Yeah, you're right. Okay. That's supported.
I'll second.
Go right ahead.
The question's on number 5. That's Rob's. So,
Larry, could you speak up a little louder, please?
you may have to move up. The questions I have, it's not a criticism, Rob. I'm just trying to find out a couple little details here. It's not a judicial inquiry. All right. Your memo today about aggregating meters, which can help in engineering and rate design. And I just asked a question going back to the dashboard about some rates and some results that were presented there by categories. We just finished a independent third-party study, which was about 6 different categories, if you recall. Large and small, commercial, industrial, street lighting, and residential, if I recall correctly. But yet we pull out of those categories to aggregate them into this dashboard data. So we have something already that we're working with. Is that correct or not correct? Or is that a manual process?
This approval, just so the audience understands what we're talking about. We have a data analytics program. So we just put an AMI program together where every customer has a meter, all right? Now we're getting all this data in. This particular package allows us to do the things that are in the memo that Rob suggested. Aggregating customers in different fashions to analyze and sort that data in a effective tool that we can use for a lot of different reasons, not just rate setting, all right? Now, your comment about the municipal, residential, municipal, industrial, and
I just
commercial
use that as an
category,
example.
all right? I understand. And this is your sales dashboard is put together in that fashion because that is the way we're required to report our sales, right? That's purely a reporting function, and we need.
Is the AMI giving you that information?
No. What that is that every customer, when we put their information into our billing system, they are put on a rate class, i.e. primary, demand energy, energy only. There's 5 or 6 different rate classes that we have, right? Yeah. That we're not reporting on our sales dashboard. The breakdown of that, we can pull it off from our billing system because we can just type that in. But when we're required to report our information to the federal government on the EIA forms that we talk about, we're required to group those customers not by rate class, but by use determination. So when we actually put that customer into our billing system, we say you're in this particular rate class, but your use is for this purpose. So for instance, Meyer is a large commercial customer. They are on the same, because they're a 24/7 operation, very levelized, own their own transformer, very high usage. They are put in the same rate class that some of Shape's industrial customers are put in because they use power in a very similar fashion. So the rates, one thing, usage, a different thing. What we're reporting in the sales dashboard is the usage category. Now, if the BLP wanted to see a report that was classified by rate class, that's what that's what we use for our customer cost of service analysis. That's by rate class because they're determining rates. So when UFS came in and reviewed the rate category with you, they were reviewing different rate classes, and in each rate class, we might have commercial or industrial customers. You understand that's dependent on what they're using it on. So this particular, once we start pulling these classes together, what Rob is talking about here in this memo is that we're also we can use our billing system to separate those and aggregate those, but now we'll be able to use the AMI system to actually look at and combine that with our GIS system, that we can actually aggregate customers by additional things that we don't put into our billing system, like what circuit they're on and how many, other areas. We can modify that data using this software in hundreds of different ways, and we can find customers that might be on multiple different rate categories that are kind of similar, and we might want to establish a rate specific to their particular patterns of usage that we might not have seen by just reviewing the billing data. Does that make sense?
I understand what you're saying. What I wonder, or my question is how large are we as an entity, and how many accounts do we have that are so diversified that $30,000 a year ongoing is going to sort out so many things so that we get a return on our investment, getting back more than $30,000 a year. I see the management tool that you're trying to do and take a look at and identify a problem, pick up something here, pick up something there. But I don't know if I'm convinced, based upon a rather shallow discussion here, that we're going to get a return of $40,000 a year, or whatever number you want to pick, something beyond 30. And I think the time is coming, based upon spending policies, that we have to warrant and justify every dollar we spend, and we're going to get something back.
Okay.
Gonna get something back tangible
Understand.
for the ratepayers.
Okay, so,
Okay, I got one other thing. I have a friend out of state. He has very large and significant holdings and investments broadly spread out. He employs technology such as this, not this specific. He said he didn't have that. So we had a conversation, all of a sudden he's asking me questions. And he says, what kind of problems do you have? I said, I don't know of any. He said, well, for example, he says, do you have a lot of marijuana growers? Not that I know of. He said, you got a lot of people stealing electricity? Not that I know of. So he says, you can't identify any problems. No.
that's you, Larry. That's
Okay.
not us.
So
Okay.
he said, well, you better take a close look at it for the $30,000 a year you're going to pay. Because he said, I get a return on what I invest. So that's my message to you. I'm not
Okay.
going to
All right.
obstruct
So first
or
of
stand
all,
in the way, but I want to know we're
I
going to
understand. I understand.
rather than just say, well, we got a lot of technology that we wanted to get by the strategic plan.
I understand there. So I can
Strategic
ask,
plan's pretty general and broad.
if I can reword your lengthy statement here in a few words, you're asking for the cost justification for spending $64
Yeah.
or $64,000. All right. That's
I'm
a very simple
30,000.
question. That's a very simple question that we can answer. And that's what Rob is getting at is some of the benefits in his email there. I'll tell you that this is, we are, I guess, slow to the ball, or slow to this technology. All right. This is actually technology that's been utilized by almost every major utility, and they have cost justified it. And we are probably the last utility of our size or greater that has not installed this data analytics package. Now,
That's only about 3 or 4
I
people in the MPPA.
no, just as a for instance, all right, when this AMI system started coming out, the idea is that you're getting tons of data, more data than what we could possibly use, because you're getting all of this information that used to be done monthly, you're getting done instantaneously, and it's all coming into your operations center. All right. So I had the pleasure of going into Florida Power and Light's operational center, right? Their operational center that takes control when they are having a power outage, or they're dispatching linemen, or they're predicting what the load might be in the next day.
Give us an example. How
I
you
am.
use it.
So they have an operations center that operates their utility. What they ended up doing is they ended up building a data analytics center right next to it. All right, to take all of this data that they're coming in, because you know what? And then they blended their operations center with their data analytics center. So they use all of this data in the operations, particularly during power outages. They can aggregate these individual customers together in a particular fashion and analyze the data very, very quickly. And they got some really good people that can use all of this operational data that's coming in on a real-time basis on the meters that we have. One of the things that they do is they tell us immediately when they're without power. That's a pretty valuable tool. All right. They also,
The problem is that right now to us.
they also tell us when they're having substantial changes. And particularly when you start putting generation on that meter, i.e. behind the meter distributed energy resources, the data becomes even more valuable in operating and knowing what they're generating at those individual sites in a real-time basis. Now, if you have all that data coming in and you don't have any software to make any sense of it, the investment, the $2 million investment that you've already made is pretty much worthless. So if nothing else, it's a $64,000 addition to a $2 million investment that you've already made. And you made the $2 million investment based on a system that's capable of not only just collecting all that data, but analyzing it. So if you see what Rob has suggested there, is this is a software package that is normally purchased when you buy the AMI system, and it's an add-on. It's just an add-on to the software that we already have, but it's a pretty valuable add-on, because if you don't buy it, you're sacrificing all of the investment that you've already made, and you're not utilizing that system to its full capabilities. So the suggestion that, geez, I'm spending $64,000 and I'm not getting anything out of it. Well, you already spent $2 million on an AMI system that was supposed to be giving you all this information without adding the $64,000.
Well, we had cost justification on the AMI program to begin with.
It's cost justified by also putting this particular add-on. If you don't put on this add-on, you're not getting the full capability that we justified the $2 million investment
Well, I
on.
guess what I'm surprised about is that you say that, but 2 years ago or 3 years ago, when we were talking about the AMI, we're going to add that to our capital budgets, this was never brought up. But all of a sudden you read something and then you come and say, oh, I think we ought to add this because it was in a strategic plan.
Larry, that's simply, Larry, stop. It's not,
These people will be calling you every 6 months to sell it to you.
Larry, that is not at all what happened. And that's why, read the letter that we gave you. When we bought the system, we told you that we put this into the capital improvement plan, and we are instituting the plan that we told you 2 years ago. It's not like this should be a surprise to you. We told you at the time.
You said you put this specific in the plan.
It's in your capital improvement plan. That's what Rob told you. This is planned investment.
I do not recall.
Anything further from the board members? All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carries. Next item.
Okay, so the next two items, item 5B, 1 and 2, have been added to your agenda, and they really are a follow-on to a discussion that we began last week with the community, right? So during our town hall meetings, there was for over a year now, there's a suggestion of what alternatives the BLP should do. In lieu of doing Plan A that we have been progressing down in 2 years, there was a suggestion that we, quote, make a pause and do certain things, take a pause and do certain things, and reevaluate and do certain things. When we did the town hall meeting, what I tried to introduce to the community and what I talked about, and I have been talking to council members and board members since, about if we don't go forward and pass the bond, what do we need to do? All right. And we called that path 2. All right. So if you didn't attend the town hall meetings, you're somewhat behind here. Is path 2 was an introduction to the community on what we will have to do to revise the project. And there is a certain way that we have to do that. Lower the amount that we bond and then buy what we need to do to fill that hole that's created. So we started that discussion. Council, we went to council at Monday night's meeting. If you didn't attend or watch the meeting, I know most of you did. I did. I think some of the other ones did. The council, I think, and I could be wrong, there's some here, they agreed that it was appropriate to start looking and start proceeding down an alternate path 2. All right. So what does path 2 mean? Is path 2 essentially, as it was presented to the town hall, is 1, we cancel, not pause, cancel the project on Harbor Island. Now, if it ever gets brought up again, that's, we can do that. But at this point in time, we are not canceling, we're not pausing the project. We are canceling it. And I think it's important to understand that this is a project that we all were saying is a good project. Not all of you, staff, everyone else was saying, and there was benefits to that project. So by canceling the project and going in a different direction, we are not going to receive those benefits that were proposed in the project. We fully understand that that's part of path 2. There's also other opportunities, there's pros and cons to either path 1 or path 2. Now, this is more of a discussion of the implementation measures that we have to do of path 2, more so than a discussion of whether it's right or wrong. All right. Once we proceed down this path, we're proceeding down this path. All right. So staff is recommending today and to proceed down path 2. All right. So if this comes as a surprise to anybody, what that means is we cancel the project. We look at an alternative site for the facilities that we need, and we start to redefine a project that will gain more support from the community. All right. Now, the problem that we have, and that this is, let's all recognize, this is 2.5 years into a particular project review. So we don't have time to study a bunch of stuff. You have before you an action that will fill the void created by that project, the capacity void, for the next 5 years. All right. What that means, and so everybody's clear, what that means is we don't then have to fill that void with this project or any other project. We are going to the market and buying it. Now, from this point forward, and I think everyone needs to realize, is there is no other local projects to consider. Everything that you will have come before you in the next 5 years will be a remote purchase from outside of our system. That is why the city council commitment that we made to them to have some generation local, and we can argue about what they told us to have here local, but for the most part, what we're saying here tonight is that we will generate no power in Grand Haven for the next at least 5 years. It's a 5-year purchase that doesn't start until 2020, planning year 2024. So we will have no local generation in the community. We don't have to argue about what it is because there will be none. There will be no local generation on the system through 2028. So what we need to do that though, is we need to redefine the quote project. And the project is defined that we bonded for in the notice of intent. All right. So what we have to do is, and there's a lot of questions. There were some statements made. I don't know all the answers either. So I had to, when we started going down this path, there's some people that say, well, we can do X, we can do Y. These are questions for the bond council. All right. Of what we can do, what we can't do. If we remember when we actually defined the project, there was a lot of questions about why don't we broaden the definition so we can include other stuff, or why don't we shrink the definition so we can do this. When we redefined the project, the project definition has to be definitive enough so the public knows what we're doing. So the discussion that I'm having here is to try to say, first of all, if the board wants to start moving down this path, staff is prepared to start moving us down this path. The potential is, as it was brought up here, we could potentially go out and buy. We're doing it tonight, right? The potential means that we didn't say we were going to do it until after you approved it, but we are approving a capacity purchase tonight that you have before us. We're authorizing that transaction. That transaction may or may not be available, by the way. So what we're doing is we're authoring in PPA to go out and solicit the market and see if we can buy that capacity, put that in our portfolio, and that alleviates the need for the capacity portion that this project was providing. It also frees up about 5%, only 5% of our energy that we will have to blend into our 5-year forward purchasing program, which we will, that's hardly anything. And particularly that would go into our next plan of hedges that we propose for you. And people will come back and fill that 5% void. But for the most part, our strategic plan said, you know, we're going to buy everything else except this particular project. Now you're pulling off this particular project off the table. So we are going to buy everything. All right. That's that. I mean, I don't know how else to say that as clearly as I can say it, but path 2, what I was trying to tell the community in the town hall meetings was that's the path, that's the only alternative path, not put a bunch of new plans on the table. We have already, as part of the evaluation of the project that we already looked at all other local alternatives that we could possibly put before our engineering team. There is no, I mean, we can talk about solar and wind and all of those, the viability of those projects locally are not competitive with what we can do remotely. All right. So we have done that analysis. We're recommending this for now. If we want to increase the amount of renewable purchases that we buy, it will be an increase of renewable purchases from elsewhere. Now, that doesn't preclude us from working with our local homeowners, businesses. We are already doing this now and we'll continue to do this, for them to put solar panels behind the meter, those types of questions behind the meter. But those things are not going to be included in the quote project definition as we revise the project definition to move forward. All right. So item 1 on the agenda is to talk about removing this particular project from the project definition. So if you look at the project definition of the bond report, it says the only generation project that bond could be used for was a Harbor Island generation project, natural gas fired, combined with snow melt. That was the definition of the project that we assumed. Now, if the community doesn't want to do that anymore, we have to take that out of the project definition. Now you can say, well, our bond counsel told us that we could remove stuff out of the project without any penalty, without doing it again, and we can we don't have to renotice it if we just pull stuff out and lower the volume. Correct. Except the fact that the generation, this was defined as a quote redevelopment project on Harbor Island for generation. That was the project definition. So if you change, just taking out the generation, you're continuing to redevelop Harbor Island in some fashion that way. We're also saying we're going to take all the other items off from Harbor Island and put them somewhere else. So we clearly are in a position where we are not going to be able to use that existing project definition to sell debt. All right. This is where the time crunch comes in. All right. If we're going to issue debt, we are going to have to go through a process of redefining the project, renoticing the project, going through a 45-day referendum period, and then getting to the point that after that we can issue the debt at the lower amount, the lower amounts. Let's say that's 25 million or 20 million, depending on how we redefine that project. The problem with the majority of that project now, the majority of the project becomes reimbursing the bands, the bond anticipation notes. Those bond anticipation notes were due on July 31. All right. So, and we are now paying a higher interest rate on those bands than we would have on a long-term interest rate that we're going to renew at. So the longer you postpone this, the longer interest rates go away and the higher the interest rate is on the takedown provisions of bond anticipation notes. So we need to move, and I'm not saying we need to hurry. We don't need to rush, but we need to, first of all, define the project. Given the fact that we are still desiring to do some of the other elements of the project, we need to define where those elements are going to be located and whether they're, quote, needed or not needed, and then determine if we're going to include those project components in the project definition. Now, in particularly, the removal of the generation component, that's relatively easy, all right? We remove it, we go by the capacity, and we move forward. Moving the items off from Harbor Island onto another site, I don't know what other site that's going to be. I don't know if that's going to be the community center has been suggested, or the diesel plant that's been suggested, or some other site. So what I would recommend here tonight is to proceed to, and this was suggested by some actually pretty astute people in the public, to suggest to you that we initiate a siting study of, and I would, this is what we originally did when we hired Progressive AE to look at siting facilities on Harbor Island, that we would initiate another study to look at what our options are for constructing some of these facilities that we have identified that we need, that were included in this project, where they may be located, what configurations may be best for our utility going forward. And that's what item 2 is here, all right? Before we can define the project, we need to know what facilities, if any, we're going to construct them, where they're going to be located, so we can include those in the bonds. Now, what also has been suggested is, why don't we just go to the bond market, repay the bonds, and then issue another bond later on? That is a very, very costly way to issue this amount of debt. Our bond counsel is already suggesting that to go from the $50 million range down to the $20 or $25 million range, there may be cheaper ways to get the money that we need without going through a full bond sale. And there's a lot of different options that our financial advisor can review to you, but the key is that we have to start making some of these decisions moving forward so that we can access the capital markets for an amount of money that we really need to continue to operate. Now, the suggestion has been made, also additionally, the suggestion has been made that, well, let's just take the $13 million of cash, or $13 million of, quote, excess cash that we have in the bank. Let's pay the bands and just finance our 5-year capital plan with our ongoing rates, and don't issue any more debt. We should be able to do that. That is not what your financial advisors are recommending, all right? And that is not what I'm recommending, because if you do that, if you take the cash in the bank and you bring the cash down to our minimum level of cash reserves, we don't have any additional cash beyond our minimum operating level that's been identified in our cost of service study to do additional cleanup efforts that might not be, that we don't have cash for. We need to issue debt to meet the 5-year capital plan. Now, if you want to start pulling all of your 5-year capital plan items off the budget or off from your capital plan and say, well, we're not going to do any of that, then take your cash and pay off the bands, and don't do any of that stuff. But the only way that we can do the other items in your 5-year capital improvement plan is that if we issue debt or substantially raise rates immediately. And I am not recommending the latter. So I think we need to proceed down this path. Your staff stands ready to move you in that direction. But I think some of the suggestions that were made in the discussion are not on the table, and they, quite frankly, are not doable from a utility perspective. So with that, I'd like to stop there and answer some questions if there are any. I think this was meant to be a discussion, And I think I've said a lot there, and so maybe we can talk a bit more and just figure out together what we need to do going forward.
Anyone on the board have comment? Go ahead.
On the bands issue, do we not have the signed contract on that currently?
So, yes. So what,
So on the
let me state what this is. The bands were meant to be a 1-year construction loan. All right, excuse me.
I know.
Let me finish. The bands were intended to be a 1-year construction loan. All right. And they were intended to be paid off on July 31. So yes, the provisions of the contract provided for a mechanism to pay those off if we didn't go to the bond market before July 31. Now, those provisions were written as a penalty for not paying off the 1-year loan in the time frame that it was supposed to be paid for. So they put a provision in there to say, okay, if you guys don't issue debt by July 31, you are going to have to pay a substantially higher interest rate, which is substantially higher is what we're paying right now. And you're going to have a rather aggressive payment schedule to pay it back. So the payment schedule, the takedown provisions in the contract are January 1, you have to pay 1/4 of it back. July 1, the second half, the next, every 6 months, pay 1/4 off. So if we don't issue debt by January 1st, we do need to start paying it down in the fashion that we agreed to pay it down in. But that is not what your financial advisors are recommending you do. It was not intended.
We don't have a choice.
We don't have a choice. We do have a choice if we go to the bond market and do what we said we were going to do. And issue debt.
We didn't do that by July 31st.
I understand that, but what we're doing is saying that do it as quickly as you can to avoid those
But
penalties.
the contract says 4 equal installments.
Those contract provisions were not intended to actually pay these debt. They were provided to you to say, if you don't issue the debt in the time frame that you're talking about, which you are correct, we have not. We need to move forward with the alternate provisions for the debt to move it forward.
Look, I'm not saying that you're not going to pay them off with the bonds. That's not the question.
Okay, well, that's
So
what
you
some people are
get the
suggesting.
bond money, okay? How do you determine how much? Because you know exactly what the cost is in paying the bands off. You know what the interest rate is. It's what, 2.3443%?
Yes,
Okay, all right. So Lynette can multiply that out. You know exactly what your interest costs are over the next 2 years.
yes.
You put that with the principal, and this is what you got to come up with on the bonds, right? And then all you have to do is pay it out of the checkbook that you put the money from the bonds into.
And not borrow anything else.
It's done. I'm just talking about.
Is this, I'm not trying to be argumentative here, Larry. I'm saying that if we do that, we will not have the funds to pay for all of the capital projects that you have in your capital improvement project.
We do the bond deal. I'm not arguing with you about that. The point I'm trying to make, if you keep quiet, is that you know exactly what your amount of money that you will have to pay on the bands as the result of the bond being issued.
Yes.
Okay. That's all. That's what you didn't say that up front, but we do know that.
Yes, we do
So
that.
we can do the calculation to determine what the amount of bonds we have to apply for, or determine what we need. That's number one. Number two, how much more costs go into the municipal bonds by dividing bond 1 and bond 2? I find that rather interesting comment. I do a little bit of bond work myself, and I can tell you, you cannot find bonds available on the market. They are gone like that. There is no problem selling municipal bonds anyplace,
Okay, Larry, I
either
didn't say.
institutionally or individually. So I'm starting to get a little nervous about how you're building this thing up. Well, it's going to cost us a lot of money if we do this and we do that. I don't know about that. You got to bring somebody in here and tell me that that is in fact the way it is. That's all.
Larry, I appreciate your perspective, okay? I really do. But that is not what I said. I said that the issuance costs the issuance costs. And if you want to know the issuance costs of our band, we can provide that to you. It was not inexpensive. So yes, doing 2 issues on just looking at the way we did this particular bond was not the least expensive way to get the money. It was quite expensive because we issued debt. We had the issuance costs of that. The reason we didn't do it all and wait till we actually knew the amount is because we didn't know the amount of the total bonds that we needed at the time that we took out the construction loan, and we had to start doing some of those things. So we bought 2 issuance costs. Now, what you're suggesting is let's buy 3 issuance costs or 4 issuance costs. So, because the issuance costs are not proportional to the size of the issue. So if you're going to do
How much more?
well, the issuance costs on the band are hundreds of thousands of dollars. Larry, they're hundreds of thousands of dollars to issue debt.
On the total cost, on the total bond issue, maybe 225,000 if we had 250 million.
Where-
I mean.
What do you mean 250 million? I don't know what you're talking about, Larry.
It's like the tall story.
I'm not telling a story, and I don't,
It's gonna get out of
Larry,
hand.
I don't, I
It's
mean,
not.
I guess I'll defer to the board here, but you know what? It's not
We can do
productive.
anything
It's
we
not
wanna do
productive.
within
It's
the
not
realm of
productive.
being-
It's not productive to get in an argument here about what the appropriate financing is. If you want to talk to our financing advisors, quite frankly, they'll be more than happy to come here, but they're probably not going to want to get interrogated either. They've made recommendations and they will be happy to justify them. But I don't know where this is coming from. I'm trying to give you alternatives.
Jack,
And I'm getting jumped all over for
It's
what?
okay, Dave, we can let it rest. I'm just saying, I don't think it will cost us that much more if you decided to go to 2 bonds.
I will be happy to
It's not
provide
going
that
to be
amount for you.
millions of dollars.
It will be hundreds of thousands of dollars. I didn't say it was going to be millions.
No, I'll take this.
let's let someone,
It's okay.
let's let someone else.
It's okay.
Can I speak? I want to take issue with one thing you said, Dave. I don't think that our choice is either path 1 or path 2 as you have defined it. We haven't defined it. The board hasn't. You did. My feeling about it is we need to work with the community on this. And the community has been very verbal about what they want. It's not path 2. It's not what they're asking for. We have 1,400 people sign a petition. Item 2 on the petition, we further request that an objective and independent study be undertaken by consultants selected by local industry leaders. That's what they want. And so my suggestion is, I think you're right on target in terms of we have to buy the capacity because we're not going to be building anything soon. But in my mind, that doesn't mean we won't build something someday. I don't know when. It could be 3 years from now. It could be 20 years from now. But to say, well, we're not going to do this, so we have to go this route, I don't agree with that. Just let me finish before you start. The problem is that this bond issue, and by the way, the project as defined was not the office building and the generation project. The project included all those other things. You made it very clear in the beginning. The project included taking down sins. It included rebuilding the substation. It included buying the smart meter. It included a number of things that we have borrowed money from Huntington for, and we have completed. I don't think the community argues with that. I have heard no objection to those things. And so if we can
if we can bond to pay that off, the community's not going to object to that. What they're objecting to is the plan that involves the office building and using natural gas for a generation whenever it's used, 5% of the time, out on the island. That's what they're objecting to. So why don't we do this? Why don't we select? And I'm not talking about just the BLP. I'm suggesting it be a combined effort of the BLP, city council, and the community. If we have to create subcommittees, fine. That work together, fine. But why don't we create a group that is representative of this community that can go ahead and select an independent, qualified, unbiased consulting firm to deal with these issues that haven't been resolved? Just hear me out.
Don't think that's what the petition said.
I just read you what the petition says.
It does not say look at all of the alternatives. It says to look at and review the alternative that we have on the table.
No, it doesn't. No, it doesn't say that. I've got it right in front of me.
Please read it again.
We further request, well, first it says we request that the Grand Haven City Council delay a decision to authorize the issuance of approximately 45 million of bonds to finance the Board of Light and Power proposed plan for construction on Harbor Island. That's the first thing. Then it says we further request that an objective and independent study be undertaken by consultants selected by local industry leaders. That's what it says, Dave.
And if they want to do that, that's fine. I'm not suggesting that they're not entitled to do that, John. What I'm suggesting is I'm trying to put a pathway before you.
I'm trying to suggest a pathway to you. And the pathway is.
That doesn't involve us at all.
It can involve us because we need to identify, I'm talking about the Board of Light and Power and City Council and the community. We need to identify who should participate in the search for this company. We need to identify who pays for it. We need to identify if an RFP is going to be used, who writes it, and what should be in it. And we need to seek somebody with the necessary experience and skill to be able to bring the community along. And very frankly, Path 2 doesn't do that. So I'm not in favor of Path 2. I want to heal this community. And that means we have to get the community and city council involved in this project.
Okay. There is no one that wants to heal this community more than me, John. And there is absolutely no one that wants to reach a compromise and quit getting beat up at every board meeting over this project. All right? For one, there is no one, absolutely no one, that has gone to try to get to the community and talk to the community more than I have to try to get consensus to move this project forward. Now, my understanding from the people that I talk to, they are asking us to relook at this project, but their desire is, I think all of those people would be more than happy that are asking us to relook at it if we, as the Board of Light and Power, agrees and the council agree to not build it. I don't think that they will be requesting an additional study if we say, you know what, let's not do this and let's move off Harbor Island and not do that. I don't think they're going to want to study. Now, as far as studying other options, and I think this needs to be plainly stated and looked at very clearly, and I'm more than happy to provide you, as I have before in the past. There seems to be this attitude that there's hundreds of projects that we can just put on the table and have the community look at. There's 3 types of projects that we can look at as a community, and there's 3 types of generation projects that have been built. Natural gas fired, solar, and wind. Now, I don't think
That's it? There aren't any others? No geothermal isn't in there?
Not in
Small
Grand Haven,
nuclear isn't in there?
not in Grand Haven, John.
Oh, okay, not in Grand Haven, because you're telling me it is.
No,
Let's
because
hear that from an independent source.
because we asked parties 2 years ago, actually almost 3 years ago now, to look at all of the options that Grand Haven feasibly had on the table. What they came back to you and what is stated in our integrated resource plan that we all approved, John, what they said is the best thing for you to do is work through MPPA to evaluate your remote projects. And if the local utility wanted to build something, which we told them we did, this is the project to build. And then they came back and said, by the way, that one isn't even economical without major modifications. That's what was told to the community. Now you're suggesting something entirely different, that there's all of these other options that they didn't look at, that we need to look at
They didn't
again.
tell us why the other options.
Oh, yes,
were
they
not-
did.
No, they didn't. Not in the
That
report.
is not
they
true,
did.
John.
No, they didn't in the report. Well, I'm not gonna argue that.
Yeah, we're-
The point
we're
I
not-
wanna make, one more point I wanna make, Jack. Our community, we really don't know, you can claim to know, but we really don't know what our community wants in terms of whether they want local generation, whether they want to buy it all, or whether they want a hybrid, some of each. We haven't really got that answered. Yeah, we did a few surveys and we had a few hundred people give us answers. We don't know that, Dave, and we need to find that out. And that's one of the things that if we hire the proper consultant, that they can find out for us. Enough said.
John, I think we know that at least the 1,100 people do not want generation. So for you to say we don't know, I think.
We don't know that, Jack.
You've been telling us for 2 months, that's the case.
They asked for a pause, Jack. They asked for a pause. They didn't say we don't want any local generation.
It was pretty clear what they did not want.
Well, it was pretty clear to me when I listened to 25 of them, that yes, they were leaving the door open.
All right,
Okay,
let's see
move on.
let's see if I can get off the dime here. So if the community would desire us to again resurrect a local generation option, and they want to put together this community this committee that you're talking about and do that particular item, the path that I'm suggesting does not preclude that.
No kidding.
All right, it does not preclude it. So if that's something that you believe that the community wants to do, and the community wants to resurrect a completely new study, it's, to do what we did 3 years ago. I'm fairly confident that they're going to come with the same results that the last two studies that we did that do this, John, and that you've refused to accept their recommendations, but we can do it again. I am not precluding that. All right. So there's really no reason to even talk about that. What I'm talking about is buying the capacity, giving us that period of time where you can, if you want to look at local generation, you will also have significant levels of remote projects that are coming before you that you can choose from. And I'm quite confident that when the community sees the local projects that are possible and the remote projects and the price that are possible, they're probably going to elect the remote projects.
Do the remote projects come in on the grid?
Absolutely, yes.
So if the grid is down, then what, Dave?
We can have
Then what
that,
happens?
we can have that discussion. I
Yeah,
don't think
we'll
that,
have that discussion.
I
believe
think,
me.
John, of all of the comments that I've read, the only person that I have seen that has continued to bring up the catastrophic failure of the grid is yourself.
Why don't you read the report by the commission that was put together by Congress to study what happens when the grid goes down? Why don't you read what they say?
I think I've shared those with you, and I've read them.
No, I shared them with you.
I've read the catastrophic type reports. Now, again, this is not productive. This is not productive. We need to move forward. We need to revise the bond proposal and bring it back to council. Now, we what
Are you
you're
willing to
viewing, what you're showing the community at this point in time is the diversity that we have on our board. And there is a split on the viability of local generation. No doubt. We have asked that question to independent people from my mind for a very long time, since 2012, for those of you that didn't see it. The answers that we get back are the same over and over and over again. Grand Haven is not a good location to build any one of those three sources of technology that I'm talking about. Wind, and I'm talking about utility scale, not behind the meter, small stuff. I'm talking about utility scale wind, utility scale solar, and utility scale gas. If you want to throw
based on cost, right, Dave? Based on cost. Not on the other factors that you
John,
can
keep your
consider.
voice down. You got the microphone in front of you. You don't have to holler.
If we want to do a reliability study associated with the economics associated with all of those projects, I think we would find the same thing. There's not added reliability to the local project.
I'd like to go back to your comment about the capacity. It was my understanding that that was something that we were hoping we could resolve that portion of it tonight.
Right. So and if we want to move to that item and then come back to the direction on the rest of the items, that might get us at least partially down the pike. So maybe we should do that. All right. Yes, please. The position statement. So, what many people don't understand, and what we've tried to talk about as a community, is that as a utility, we have two requirements. We have to go buy the energy that we use in the community. We also have to provide, in advance of a planning year, we need to provide capacity. We have tasked MPPA, the Michigan Public Power Agency, with currently buying all of our energy and all of our capacity. We do that under the Energy Services Project agreement that was signed in 2012. So otherwise, when people start talking about buying from the quote grid, what they're talking about is this particular buying arrangement that we have. We don't buy from anybody else. We don't solicit proposals from multiple parties. We buy from the grid at what's called the MPPA commercial pricing note. We don't even buy it at our quote city gate like they do with the gas utility. We buy it, MPPA buys all of the power, and then they allocate the costs to us based on our proportionate share of the quote power purchase commitments that they enter into. So if the city of Grand Haven wants to change what they're purchasing, what they do is they give direction to the Joint Action Agency. They say, well, I'd like to buy more renewable energy. I'd like to buy into a solar farm. I'd like to buy into a wind farm. I'd like to buy into certain blocks of power, or I'd like to increase the amount of firm purchases I have and less short-term purchases, or longer-term hedges and less shorter-term hedges. Those purchases are all controlled under what we have supplied to them, what we call our energy risk management program, which you all have approved, which most people don't even know what it says. And what in 2017, when I started this process, I said the very first thing that we need to do as a community is we need to review our energy risk management program and make sure that we're all consistent with the directions that we're giving MPPA. Now, if we want to change the directions that we give MPPA for the amount of power that they buy and how they buy it, then we as a community need to decide that. And then we have to tell them that's what we want to do. And they will go out and get the necessary purchases. So one of those components of that diversified portfolio that we talk about is this product called capacity. When you buy capacity, you get no energy, zero energy. That means the kilowatt hours don't actually get delivered to your community or even to the grid from that unit on your behalf. It's a planning mechanism. And MISO has created these capacity markets so that they're ensured that when we go into a given year, that all the participants that are participating in the marketplace have generation out there of adequate size to meet the peak load. Now, it's interestingly, this capacity market doesn't exist in California and Texas. It was one of the reasons why that Texas failed, is they did not have a system where the utilities went in advance and said, we're gonna split up the cost of this capacity so that we maintain adequate reserves and capacity on the system. So 2 years ago, when we started building this or proposing this particular project, I went to MPPA, and MPPA went to the state, and they told them that Grand Haven was going to buy all of their capacity for a given period of time, with the exception of one unit, the unit that we had proposed. That was 2 years ago. Now we're required to provide a 4-year forward plan. So that forward plan right now includes 2 planning years up on this chart, 2024 and 2025. All right. So this unit was supposed to go online on June 1 of 2023. I committed on behalf of Grand Haven that unit was going to be put in place. Now, if we're no longer going to pursue that particular item, we need to fill quite frankly, soon, the commitments that the community made to the grid that we would have capacity for planning year 24, 24, and 25. All right. Now, when I went to MPPA and said, look, we're looking at pulling this unit out of our plan, what we call our resource adequacy plan, they said, you know what? I don't think I'm going to be able to buy capacity for you in 24 and 25 without a longer term commitment. You say, well, why is that the case? And this is what our community has to start understanding and talking about. Because when you're buying on the grid, or from MPPA into this process, we need to understand the market dynamics that are occurring out there. Else, we're not going to make very logical choices. And what's happening nationwide right now in these markets is we are shutting down generation. And we're not replacing it fast enough. All right? Let's all be honest. That's what's happening. All right? And we as utilities are required to come up with this capacity, and it's currently given, and what most people, if you didn't read, our largest utility in this area is shutting down its major coal-fired plants, all of them, thousands of megawatts on that planning year, 24, 25. So now we are going to the market behind everyone else because everyone else is fully hedged through 2025. All the other utilities have gone out and bought it. All right. And now we're going to the market in these years, trying to buy that capacity that everyone else has already attained in a very short market. And it's getting shorter. So Larry raised a good point earlier before the meeting is, why aren't we looking out even further than 5 years? All right. That's a good question. Some of these assets that we're buying from aren't going to be around after 2028. So what we're trying to do is access that market of existing generators. These aren't new ones. These are existing generators that can sell to us, and buying their capacity so we can meet our contract obligations that we no longer meet when we pull this unit out of the marketplace. All right. So we have MPPA on our behalf has solicited some initial interest in this purchase. And we believe that they can pull the trigger. If we sign that authorization form, they can go out and buy capacity for this 5-year period of time. And
Can they buy it for more?
What's that?
Can we be on record as asking for more? So if it shows up, we can get it?
You can ask for more, but what typically happens is they scout before you get one of these authorization forms. What happens is they go to the market and they scour the market for what they think they can get. Then they tell you what we think we can get. And that indicative pricing is what's included on the authorization form that you have. The capacity, the price per KW month, and it's a maximum price for KW month. So, because most of these transactions are fluid. In other words, they're changing price on a regular basis. So we think we can get this in the next month or so, we can get it at that price. But what they've done is padded that price a little bit so that if they don't get it at, let's say, $4.50, they can go up to $5 to get it. Now, if you remember, in February of this year, we came to you and MPPA was recommending to all of its members to fully hedge through 2028. In other words, they foresaw in the marketplace that the capacity was drying up for these purchases. So they recommended all of their members buy through 2028. So all of the other members at MPPA have bought through 2028. We are a single body transaction, which, by the way, I'm not even sure that MPPA can do that. All right. So this is the plug to try to avoid in the future individual requests through MPPA, because the contract that we have with MPPA, what they do is they blend these requests from multiple parties and they go out to the market at once. Now we're going to the market, instead of that blended product for 100 megawatts that we were looking at in the spring, now we're going to the market for a single party, one party at MPPA, which their risk management program has a prevention that suggests that when we go to the market, they like multiple parties to go so that if any one defaults, the other parties pick up the slack. We don't have anybody in this particular transaction that will comply with we call it the uptake or the provisions of our contract that shares the risk to other members of MPPA of this particular transaction. So this is a unique transaction that MPPA isn't even sure at this point in time. But what we're suggesting here is we're requesting you, if you can get that price, go to the market and pull the trigger ASAP. All right. So what's going to have to happen is that particular contract is going to have to go to the MPPA board of directors at its next meeting in early September, and they're going to have to approve that transaction as well, which we don't normally have to do for there is no guarantees at this point in time. And the concern that we have is in this environment where these large coal-fired plants, we believe that the auction next year, if we have to go to the auction next year, which is the next alternative that we would have to go to, available at auction, the parties pay what we call CONE, or the cost of new entry. All right. So right now, this price that we're proposing is less than the cost for the initial years of this new unit. So you're saying, well, geez, why don't we do this all along? Because the economic analysis that we did for this particular project, the capacity was higher priced in the initial years and lower priced in the out years. So we are actually taking advantage of that thing. But if we go and build another unit in the next 5 years or whatever, you're going to push those higher costs, and you're probably may or may not have the same economics. The economics are going to change when you review this particular project or a similar project locally, in the capacity markets in particular, because these are changing monthly, if not daily, in the environment that we're in right now. So
what happens if we end up building something and it's completed? Let's say at the beginning of 2026, can we sell the capacity that we bought on the market?
yes, and you could either make out on that or
or
you,
lose,
or
depending
lose,
on what
depending on what it is.
it
right,
is.
Right.
It
That's what,
sounds like because there's a lack of capacity, we probably will not lose.
okay, so
Let me ask you another question.
just a minute, John, before we go off that point, is we can do that, all right? But our own policies prevent what you're suggesting, all right?
What policy is that?
Our energy risk management policy. So this is where every minute, I mean, we're going into this market, you need to understand the marketplace, all right? That is called, what we call in the utility business, speculation, all right? We are not speculators in the energy market. We do not buy from one party and then hold it.
We're not
assuming-
trying to do that, but the conditions change.
I understand that, but that's what I'm
It's
saying.
not
When-
speculation.
When we enter into this transaction, our intent is to use this as a utility, all right? That doesn't mean that we may not change our mind in the future, but if you're buying this with the intent of selling it, that is not what I'm recommending. all
That
right?
isn't what I'm talking about.
Okay,
What
I
I'm
just wanna make
saying
that-
is, if we put a plan in place and build something and have excess capacity, can we sell it on the marketplace? You've answered the question.
Yes,
The answer
so,
is yes. Let me ask one more
okay,
thing.
so let me.
Why 15 megawatts?
Okay, so this is the position statement, all right? So this is the position statement that we have right now. So,
Why not 12 and a half?
okay, I understand what you're saying. That's why I'm going to answer your question, right? So this position statement is included in your quarterly report every quarter. So this should not appear as a new item to any of you, all right? So if we look at what's up here, and this was presented to you in the spring of the year when we purchased our capacity through 2028. So what is this, what is this chart even saying? So the top line is what we call our planning reserve margin requirements, all right? As an individual utility in the marketplace, MISO determines this. This is not something that we determine. MISO determines this for MPPA, and then MPPA allocates the planning reserve margin to its members. Now, what is this planning reserve margin? This is our peak need, not when we peak, when the system peaks. All right. So if you look at Grand Haven's load during the annual peak, you will get some number. All right. Now that number is required to be projected forward in a linear regression. That's very, very, it's not something that we get to choose. It's done for us and handed to us. And every party then takes that peak load and they look at summer loads, they look at winter loads, they look at all this stuff and they say, okay, this is the hour that we are planning for in a given year. And then they allocate that to all of the different utilities. And then they add what we call a system reserve margin. So everybody looks at what's out there and if there's excess, that excess capacity gets divvied up to all of the parties involved. So if the system as a whole in our region, let's say it has a reserve margin of 8%, they look at all of the generators in that particular area and they say, okay, there's 8% excess capacity in our particular region above that peak, then everyone has to buy 8%, right? Everyone has to buy that same amount. So if you have over, you have surplus to sell in the capacity markets. If you have under, you have to buy that amount. So this is a planning calculation that they do going out and they're assessing the cost of maintaining that excess reserve margin amongst all of the parties, all right? Now, since we don't have any capacity, we have to buy it all. So over a series of about 8 or 9 purchases, which some of them are listed here, we have some capacity that we get from what we call the landfill project. And then there's some capacity that's included in some of our renewable purchases that we have. And then we go out and we just buy what we call zonal resource credits in zone 7. And so those numbers underneath, the 2 megawatts, the 53 megawatts, and then the 9.5 and the 44, those all add up to the amounts that we've gone out previously and purchased. So in 2023, we have a 17.4 megawatt need to buy capacity. Now you say, well, how did we get to 17.4? When we were only planning on, 12.5 megawatts coming from the new resource. The reason why is we weren't fully compliant at the time, and MPPA shared some of its excess between its members, and we will have to do what John is talking about, is in the planning year, we will be buying and selling within MPPA a volume equal to that difference between the 12.5 that we had, and every year going out, you'll see some variability either above or below that 12.5 megawatts. So just going out, what they're recommending that we do now is buy the 15 megawatts, because the 15 megawatts is a good fit into that calculation for 5 years. Now, what is that going to result in? You're right. And this is in 2025, we will have 8 megawatts additional that in all likelihood will be sold in the auction at that time, at the beginning of the year or before, to other members. So we will be taking some of that and we will be selling it. Now, you say, well, why don't we just buy 17.4, 7.7, 15.5, 15.9, 16? You don't buy capacity, particularly in the level that we're talking about, at increments of 100 kW. You need to have a consistent volume, because somebody doesn't want to take a 5-year capacity and allocate 1 year lower to us, and that's not going to be available in that fashion. So yes, we take risks. We do this, and if the anticipation is that we're going to sell some of it or buy some of it in this calculation, that's exactly what's going to happen. So when we buy 15.0 megawatts is in planning year 2024 will still be 2.4 megawatts shy, and we're going to have to pick that up on the short term. And 2025, we're going to have 7.3 megawatts extra. And then in the other years, you're pretty close. And when those calculations are redone, we're also going to move to more actual information instead of 5 years in advance. So if we get a new load in the community, that's a big 2 megawatt load. Obviously, whenever that comes online, we're going to have to add it to that calculation. We'll be deficient. The same happens if one of our largest customers or something leaves, then we have bought capacity for that time frame that we could sell in the later auctions.
So with the 12.5, we would have had to go to the short-term market anyway.
For that.
For every one of those years, except for
Correct.
one.
Correct.
We would have had to go there anyway.
Correct. Now the difference, and that's not uncommon for anybody. I mean, we're not getting into an exact calculation here. We're doing a planning thing so that we are, and quite frankly, you'd kind of rather be short than long. All right. If you're short in these calculations, we will be able to trade within MPPA to make that up, and it will not be at a substantial price. As long as we are trying to hit that, and what you'll see here at some point is the 95% threshold. What most people do is they plan to about 95%. So what are these, just a minute, before you go on, these other numbers here, what are these other numbers? All right. So the net contracted bilaterals that we currently have signed at MPPA for 2023, 2024 are at a price of $405 per kW month. Take that number times 1,000, that's per megawatt month, times 12, that's how much the annual price is for each one of those contracts. All right, and that's the average. So if you take the 405 times the 53.5, I believe it is, you'll get the 2,138,400. All right, so that 2,138,400 is what our capacity purchases currently signed cost the city. We have already made that commitment. Now the $4.75 is what MPPA has done, is they always maintain on our behalf what we call a forward price curve. So when they evaluate projects on whether they're above or below the forward price curve. So their forward price curve currently for capacity is $4.75. All right. Now they're saying here that if that forward price curve is correct and they go to the marketplace, they will be able to buy capacity in that year at $4.75, which is less than the $5 that they've shown in there. And they will then pay $991,800 for that 17.4 megawatts. So in our forward price projections that we're getting from MPPA, there is $3,104,542 in our current forward projection from MPPA, so that when they tell us what they now believe our price will be in 2023, 2024, it includes 407 for capacity. The weighted average of what we actually purchased with what the cost is for what they think they're going to purchase. Now, once they go out and buy 15 megawatts, they will put the 15 megawatts at whatever price they contract for into that 2,131 or 138,400, and they will lower the 991,800 by what was actually still required of us. So then they will provide you a report, which they provide every quarter, that has your capacity position and what they believe your capacity price will be through 2028. All right. So that's this process that we're going to go to. And what I'm saying is, I'm not telling you that this is an automatic, but when we cancel the project, we immediately go to this scenario. We've already signed up for that. It's not a choice that we have. We've already said, if we don't do this, we go to this and we have to do this. So there's no pause involved. There's no reevaluation involved. You cancel the project, you go to this, you buy it. And what MPPA is saying is that they don't believe they can get it for less than 5 years right now. So they're recommending that we bring ourselves to this 2028 timeframe that everyone else at the agency is fully hedged for, and fully buy all of our capacity, the 15 megawatts, and get in a similar position to everyone else. Does that make sense? So that brings us to the author, and you can show the other charts there. There's several other charts here that are included again in your quarterly monthly report from MPPA that shows your capacity position graphically, and it just shows you some of the other with the forward price curve and some of the other things that we have embedded into that first chart graphically. I'm not going to go into that. I'll be happy to do that the next time that we go over our quarterly report, but it is both MPPA's recommendation and my recommendation to authorize them to go to, if we're gonna move down this path of canceling the project, they're suggesting as soon as possible to go out and buy a 15 megawatt block for 5 years at anything less than $5. So this process then is the board gives me the authorization to sign that deal. And I tell MPPA then, as your member authorized representative of MPPA, that they have the authorization to go out and buy that capacity.
Okay, let's have the board weigh in now on what they want to do.
But I would encourage you to go to everything you said here and presented. If you could get 10 years, not paying more than $60,000 per megawatt, it's got to be money in the bank.
Okay, so
If you can get it.
I understand. What I want to remind the board of is, okay, if and this is for the council members as well, this particular transaction, if you approve of it under our energy risk management policy, you have the authority to authorize and purchase a 5-year deal. All right. If we go to a more than 10-year deal, more than 10 years, there's charter provisions in the charter that require you to bring that to the city council. A few years ago, we extended the courtesy of council that if it's over 5 years, we bring that to them for their approval. Right now, we just agreed to do that. That's not a charter requirement. We agreed to do that. So if you go over 5 years, and we can look at doing that, I would recommend that we do this transaction and then we look at MPPA's recommendation. Now, the other thing that if you go out and you buy all this capacity, now when we actually have energy projects that we buy into, i.e. a big solar panel, big solar farm we want to buy into, or a a big, another renewable resource of some sort, or potentially some other product that we buy. Those will all come with capacity, some level of capacity. It won't, solars do not come with, if you put a one megawatt of solar, you don't get 1 megawatt of capacity, and that's a whole different story. But if we start going into some of these renewable projects, they will come with some capacity.
But that's at about 10%, 20%, is it not?
Right now it's 50%
On solar.
So if we buy, and so how does MPPA determine that capacity that they give to solar? Is they look at the amount of solar that's on that peak hour that they're looking at, and they say, oh geez, 50% of the solar was on during that peak hour that we're looking at. And right now, about 50% of the solar capacity that's installed in Zone 7 is on during that particular peak. So MISO is allotting 50%. Now, what you're recollecting is a conversation that we had is if that hour that they're looking at changes to the winter months, and MISO will allocate less capacity to those solar because they're only going to be producing at 10% in those winter months. That could be a potential in the future. So but right now we're getting about 50% capacity allocation toward this particular, if we get it going to solar.
Just for information, what is wind?
About 34% right now.
Thank you.
What's the wishes of the board?
Make a motion, go forward. Second.
Now that's your question.
Motion to do what?
Authorize, I would say it's number 2, right? Authorize MPPA to execute a 5-year approximate 15 megawatt capacity, 2,800 terms not to exceed those contained in the letter of authorization.
Which is up here. All right. So the letter of authorization is up here. What you're authorizing in the motion is for me to sign this and send it back to MPPA for essentially an up to 4.5 million. Which for context, I know that sounds like a lot of money to those in the audience that might not understand, but a $4.9 million over those 5 years is roughly 5% of our entire power needs for that particular period of time.
You're not paying it all up front.
No. And you're paying as you go, all right? Yeah. So you'll actually pay this on a monthly basis over that, and it'll be about 5%. So again, this is kind of when we did that comparative analysis of the project that we were looking at, the 12.5 megawatt, we were looking at about $1,100 for the 12.5 megawatts in debt service. All right. So we're actually saving about $200,000, a little over $200,000 a year by buying this capacity. Now we're not getting that call option that I talked about. All right. So it's not apples to oranges, but simply on the capacity side, this is actually cheaper than the alternative that we were looking at, strictly on capacity, by about $200,000 a year. So
are we ready to vote? Yes. Please call the roll.
Is this on? Director Crum?
yes.
Director Keith?
Yes.
Director Nasser?
Yes.
Director Withrow?
Yes.
Chairperson Smith?
Yes. That leaves us with item 1.
Okay, so let me make a suggestion here, because I do think we have to, I would hate to see a month go by and you don't give me any kind of direction to proceed towards a new bond, all right? So what I was trying to do, and again, this is discussion, but I would like to get some direction from you all on where you want me to go, all right? Because I don't think we should just sit for another month, come back in a month, and then I don't have any direction from you on how to proceed towards a bond issue, all right? I think that would be a mistake. So what I'm trying to do here, and I'm fine with you guys changing what my recommendation is, all right? If you want to add or subtract to the recommendation, that's fine. But from my perspective, we need to begin defining a project, all right? Now, there's also some other things that we can do in that project, all right? Our capital improvement plan, 5-year capital improvement plan, was somewhere around 87 million, right? So the total 5-year plan wasn't contained all on Harbor Island. there's a lot of projects in the capital improvement program that we were planning on funding with cash,
Revenue,
with the cash.
yeah, from revenue.
From revenue, correct. So we planned, so that cash that people say we have in the bank, that cash is being built up over time to fund these rather intense capital improvement program that we have in the next 5 years, because the next 5 years is larger than the last 5 years, and it's probably larger than the next 5 years after. So we are going into this period where we're spending a lot on capital improvements, and the primary capital improvements that we're spending on are not on Harbor Island. They're in our distribution system.
What?
They're in the distribution system. And if you look at our capital improvement plan, there's substation. We just spent $4 million on the substation on the island. If you remember,
What percent comes out of revenue? What percent was going to come out of the bonds?
none of that was going to come out of the bonds.
Okay.
Right? So that was the funding that process that we had. So what we are going to do in the next month is we're going to look at potentially funding other elements of that capital improvement plan rather than the more undetermined levels of so that we can rate, we don't have to wait fully until we define this project, because that could take us a while. So if we know we're going to build, you know, and you guys already approved, what was the amount on the transformer? $3 million on the transformer. So we already have a project going right now where we're going to put a new transformer at Ospop, move the old transformer from the Ospop sub to the north sub. All right, that particular project is a $3.5 million project. Now, if we redefine the project to include some of these elements of our distribution system improvement, then we don't have to so clearly define some of these other things that we don't know yet. All right. So when we looked at the right sizing of the bonds, we weren't looking at just this one capital improvement on Harbor Island. That's the fallacy of what everybody's talking about. Just the Harbor Island project was $57 million. And then there was almost another $30 million that we were looking at in this 5-year capital plan. The idea behind going to the bond market wasn't just to provide enough capital to do this. The other elements that some people are saying, well, use that money is pledged towards something else. So if we move some of those elements into the project, then we could pay for those elements in lieu of potentially some of the more controversial elements. The one thing that we were doing, which everybody should be aware, is we were limiting the amount of money that we were dedicating towards the Harbor Island cleanup in the bond issue. All right, because we didn't know what that, we can at this point in time, very kind of closely determine what the cost is of these substation upgrades. That's pretty easy. We can just go out there and determine it. And we can put that amount of money into the capital plan for a bond and not have to include so much of this other stuff that is more flexible and we don't really know it is yet. So there was a comment being made by the public that said, how can you go to the bond market and not know what these costs are? Well, those costs that we didn't know, we were putting in the category of funding it with future revenues and cash. And we were putting the portion of the project that we knew the cost of, or relatively close to knowing the cost, in the bond project. Now we can move those costs around if we're going to redefine the project. All right. So what I'm saying is we need to get into a process of working with our financial advisors to determine what projects should be included in the quote project and what projects aren't, and then determine what an appropriate level is for the bonds. And then we need to set a not to exceed amount that everybody's comfortable with and say, well, that's 25 million or that's 30 million. And then we need to post that notice, and that notice then gets publicly posted, and the public can then either demand a referendum or not demand a referendum over a 45-day period. So we need to redo that process. Now, I think it would be quite foolish not for this board to not direct your staff to start looking at redefining that project and what amount is appropriate to bond and what amount isn't appropriate to bond, so we can bring you something, at least a report next month, and maybe an actual project the following month, or maybe we can do it next month. But we need, and I think this is what council was asking for, if I'm not mistaken, they're here, is they want us to determine, rather than for them to sit on the council floor and start taking stuff out and putting stuff into the bond project, they want you to look at it, make a recommendation of what you all can agree to, and then they can then comment on it and either approve it or disapprove of it. But Monday night, they didn't act on that because, quite frankly, they don't know, at this point in time when we started talking about this, they don't know the quote definition of the project, all right? So we need to define that for them. So what action do I recommend at least to start doing in the next month? And we're gonna start spending money on this, all right? So I don't know the exact cost, but I would like to spend more time with our bond counsel and financial advisor that we've already approved, and that their costs will be reimbursed when we actually sell the debt, but there's still costs. Like you say, Larry, there's cost associated with looking at all these alternatives, and they will recover that cost when we actually sell debt. But they need to start looking at this stuff and working with us on figuring out a revised bond plan and a revised project definition. The one thing that I think we do need to do is, and I think it was rather astute again from this, I think it was, his name was Brent Clark. I've never met Brent, but he said one of the things that we need to do is if we believe, and I still believe that this is the case, that we need some facilities, all right? And I don't think, and it's funny, he said the same thing that I think many people have told me is, we don't really have a problem with you guys building the necessary facilities that you need to do to operate. We would be silly to tell you what those facilities are and where they should be located. We want you to not put them on Harbor Island. So what we're suggesting here is that we go, and I think that, and I'm not making this recommendation because I know what their answer is going to be, but I think we already have been working with Progressive A&E on this type of analysis. I think they are the person that can most quickly pick up where they left off and say, okay, we're not going to use the Harbor Island site now, and this is what we asked them to do before. Look at the needs of the utility, the square footage that we need to build somewhere, and then probably work with a local realtor and look at what's available, different locations around. And I think there's been 2 that have been suggested. There's probably more, but whether that be in the 2 that I'm suggesting that would be on the table is kind of look at the diesel plant again for a little different configuration, and potentially look at the community center here. And if those rise to the surface, but we need some level of review. And I don't think if I come here, it's obvious that I'm not going to come here and say, well, this is what you should do. And everybody's going to say, well, why didn't you get somebody else to look at that and make an assessment at this point in time? So what I would like to do is, and if you don't like Progressive A&E, I can go look for somebody else, but I think Progressive A&E has a reputation in this community of doing very, very good planning in this environment. We've already used them. Now, some people didn't like what they told you, but I think they're entirely qualified to look at this particular, in a relatively tight time frame, let's say 30, 45 days, and make a recommendation back to you. And first they can look at, and I think we have some Monday morning quarterbacking going on, both in this room and outside this room, of what we need and what we don't need. Well, I think I'm more than happy to go through this of what we think we need and why it shouldn't be on one site, because we talked about that as well, and put some scrutiny to it and see if we can get by with less or more. And if we need more, then that's the case. But and how it can be configured and what different sites in the community. And I think our goal is to remain some presence in the area to the west of 31, because there I mean, you don't know how many times we hear people come into our office saying, why is your office way out here in the middle of nowhere? You know, I think but that doesn't mean that we can't locate some of our operating personnel over there. So if that means that this building is on the table to locate our you know, some of our offices that we can use in this building, that's fine. There's also been a lot of interest in us looking at our history in the diesel plant is potentially being part of the redevelopment of the diesel plant and putting some of our offices in that facility. I don't really, at this point in time, I am not taking a position one way or another, but I think we need to move forward with the evaluation. And then we can look at what they say, and then we can address these. But for those people that are suggesting we don't need any additional facilities and just live with what you got, I would encourage you to come and see how we are cramming too many people in a location that was not designed for that. So we do need additional facilities somewhere. And if you don't like, I am more than happy to take any suggestions from the public on where they think those facilities should be, and we will include them in this analysis, and then we will report back on what the most cost-effective and most productive options that we have on the table. And then we can either include those in the project or not include that in the project. Or we might want to take some of the other elements that we currently have in our capital improvement plan and put those in the bond and take this particular facilities off if we want to look at it further.
Now, are you suggesting meeting halfway between or whatever, this meeting and next month's meeting?
Well, if I can get the board to give me that direction to start working with the consultants that we've already approved working with, our bond consultant, our bond counsel, our financial advisor, and our facilities team that we have in place. If you want us to use somebody else, then it's going to take more time. But if you want us to continue to use those people and just direct them to do some of this work, I think we can get this process moving relatively quickly and get a revised recommendation to you at your next meeting. If you want to think about it and not do anything and wait for 2 weeks or wait for the next month to give me direction, I think it's appropriate if we can get consensus from everybody here to, and all three of those people have already been authorized by you to, and quite frankly, I know a lot has been said about the quote objectivity or independence of these consultants that we have, but there is absolutely, I am encouraging everyone in the room that has that opinion to point to one recommendation that any of these consultants have used that is in their own self-interest. So
I'm gonna ask the board, what's your pleasure?
Well, I don't have a problem with, if you want to work with progressive, I guess that's fine, but we need to have more than just 2 sites. To have the discussion. We need, if you're going to hire a company like that, we need to have 5 or 6 sites, and not any regard to east and west of a highway. And that is silly.
What's your pleasure on the next meeting? We gotta.
just so you understand again.
Find the project.
Just so you understand is, I just said, if there is anybody in this room, including yourself, that has an idea of what a site is, what they have said is that they would involve a local realtor that does not have the same expertise as them to identify sites that may be available, but we can only use the sites that are available. Unless you want to start clearing big areas. I mean, Grand Haven is pretty.
Make inquiry to see if the site could be available. It's not what's got a for sale sign.
I understand that.
Yeah.
Well, if you have a site that you're talking about, then tell me. We'll include it. I mean, at some point in time, we got to move forward, Larry. That's all I'm saying. Let's move forward. If you guys got ideas.
I want to move forward.
Okay, I gotta let
There's some things that bother me.
others, might want to chip in now. Todd, you've been quiet all night. Todd's been quiet all night.
Yeah. Give him the mic.
No, I'm fine. Can you hear me? PA&E, I think they're more than qualified. And I do think that we need to move forward with a new facility. And I think that it would be prudent to look at our 5-year capital plan and perhaps include, if it's cost effective, into the bond proposal. You have the North sub, correct? And Sternberg sub, $3 million. So I think, perhaps when you're meeting with a financial guy, I think that it is prudent to look at the 5-year capital plan and see what else could be included, along with some of the others that council already looked at, which is, the substation on Harbor Island, AMI, maybe perhaps this plus package that's going on the AMI. I mean, I think we need to move forward, most definitely. So I'm comfortable giving the direction to staff to move forward with everything I mentioned. Thank you.
John?
I am not comfortable with ignoring what the public has told us. I think that we need to, I'm not suggesting we stop dead in the water, which is my read on option 2. But I am in favor of finding another consultant who can deal with the several issues that have not been dealt with. One of them is location. We never really, you can say what you want about A&E, and I'm not going to badmouth them, but doggone it, we asked them for a comparison of cost and also other factors to build the tech center out on the island rather than at Eaton Drive. And we didn't really get much, we did not get enough out of them in terms of what they told us. I just think it's to our advantage as a Board of Light and Power to follow what the community has asked for and to work with City Council and you want to talk or you want to listen?
Gentlemen.
Jerry? Oh, should be in Larry.
Go ahead, John.
Glad. Well, I'm in favor of,
John, may I propose a solution that if this doesn't,
I'm in favor of putting together a work committee and asking, yeah, you're shaking your head.
no, I'm not.
And asking City Council to do the same and asking the appropriate organization representing the public to do the same and work together to work through these problems. That's what I'm in favor of. I'm not in favor of pushing the pause button never meant going plowing the same ground over again. That is not what it meant.
John, that is not what I'm suggesting. If you want to, as a community, and you want to be the leader of it, I don't care. I'm not suggesting that. If you guys want to relook at local generation and open up another study committee to look at local generation, that is independent from this process that we're talking about.
It isn't, because
we are pulling.
The answer to that really determines a lot about what we're going to do in the future.
We are pulling the local generation out of the bond deal.
I understand that.
Now, if you want to look at a future bond deal for a local project, and you want to put together a committee as a board to do that, that is entirely independent. I don't
want to look at it, Dave. I want to know what the community wants. And we don't know at this point.
And if they want to hire an independent consultant to look at that, that's fine. This is not preventing that from happening.
That isn't in our bailiwick. They do it.
They told us that they wanted it to be independent from us.
What?
I'm not.
What?
The study. They wanted it to be independent from the BLP. That's what they told us. If they want to do it, there's absolutely nothing that we are doing to prevent
think we
them
should be a
from
part of
putting
it.
together an independent study to look at the past project or any other future project. We are not preventing it. We are saying we are taking it out
They're
of this
also
bond.
saying we don't want to be a part of it.
I'm not saying I would love to be a part of it, but they are saying that if they want it to be independent. That's what we've been told.
You and I are hearing the same thing. I come closer to it than you are.
Okay. Let's just have a motion to move this process forward.
I'll make that
Hash
motion.
out.
Do you feel comfortable with enough information as staff to move
We're
forward?
going to proceed with a redefinition of the project.
That is my
For
motion.
your and council's approval. And
You gotta remove the
He's saying.
generation.
that removes the generation and looks at alternative sites for the facilities that we need.
That's my motion.
We have
Leave the
a
rest of it
motion.
in the bond proposal or what?
Well, the recovery of the bands, yes. The recovery of the bands is part of the project, for sure. What we've already spent money on.
So we,
Say it one more time, Joe.
Yeah.
Now you want to read back the motion, please?
Okay, you want to move forward with the redefinition of the project for the CHP?
Correct.
And
Relocating the facilities, other facilities on the site.
facilities on the site.
You don't mean relocating the substation.
No, it's already done. We're not, no, I'm not gonna do
Well, it's on the site.
that. No. The bands would be the other portion of the project is to, and this is what we're also, just so you know, is that there is a discussion of whether the project is a new project, and we can either leave the old project like it is and define a new project, and then we can combine those two into a single bond. All right, so the stuff that's already done, we really don't want to notice that stuff because it's already completed. All right, so the question is whether we, and this is a legal question, not a Dave Walters question, is whether the project is two projects and we bring them into one bond, or if they are an amended project definition for the original notice, and we repost the amended project for the one project. Yeah, I know that's kind of confusing, but it's a legal question of whether or not we can just approve another project, or if we have to amend the project that we currently have. All right, and that's a question that we will investigate and come back to you with a recommendation. But the net result is that we are doing exactly what you suggest, is redefining a project with no generation on Harbor Island and no other facilities on Harbor Island.
Okay, I'm gonna call for a roll call vote.
Director Crum,
Yes.
Director Keith,
Yes.
Director Nasser,
Because it doesn't follow what the community wants, I vote no.
Director Witherell,
Yes.
Chairperson Smant,
Yes.
Carries 4-1. So that takes care of item 1 and 2 of B, and now we're up to other business. Do you have any other business, Dave?
I don't have it.
Okay, anything from the board?
General
Okay.
question. On that resolution, 2018 city and the PLP, do we have to play a part in resending that, or? And if we do, when do we address that, or?
The mayor's right here.
Huh?
The mayor's right here. Mayor,
Okay.
can you answer that?
Let me take a cut in, and you tell me if I'm wrong.
Go for it.
Okay. If you remember there was 2 resolutions that were approved, all right? The council made a resolution to approve the shutdown of Sims contingent on the BLP making certain commitments, all right? proceeding with snow melt. We can argue about what the size was gonna be, all that other kind of stuff, but they basically said, we approve the shutdown of Sims, but we want you to make certain commitments. So then we made certain commitments. All right, now I think what they're talking about is rescinding the requirement that you guys make commitments so that you then are free to revise the project and to do certain things. So them rescinding their resolution doesn't require your approval, all right? You changing your direction is then your decision, not being forced upon by them. Is that your understanding of the process?
That's also my understanding, that council made a resolution authorizing closure of Sims with those conditions. And those were conditions we dictated basically to the BLP. You came back with a companion or corresponding resolution acknowledging that and agreeing to those conditions, and that authorized the closure and demolition of Sims. Now, we're not going to withdraw the permission to close Sims. It's a little late for that, but we will. What we've committed to doing was rescinding the conditions we placed on that authorization. So basically, the resolution that we passed was just simply going to be permission to close Sims. I mean, it's kind of late in the game to be playing with those words, but that's the commitment we made Monday night. We didn't vote on it. It wasn't on our agenda. We discussed it at some length. I think there was agreement among all council members that it was time to do that. We hadn't done it before this point. We kind of let the process play out. And here we are. And at this point in the game, we're saying we will rescind our conditions on a resolution. What you do with your resolution would be your business.
So it requires no action on our part.
Well, if you want to leave your resolution standing, that means you're agreeing to do all those things that we asked you to do. You probably don't. So you probably want to.
All right, so then we should rescind.
You may want to formally rescind it. It's pretty much null and void.
Project, you're essentially.
I was just saying, it's pretty much null and void at that point anyway, but if you wanted to make a formal action just as housekeeping, that would probably be the thing to do.
That's exactly what I said. I mean, we just made commitments. If you change your commitment, that you now have the authority to do that, right? Because they're rescinding their requirement.
When we rescind ours, then there will be no conflict with whatever you do. Unless you rebuild Sims, in which case I'm still authorizing you to tear it down.
So it's kind of based on that rescinding is where we're at right now.
Yes. Everything you've discussed has been contrary to those resolutions, and we understand all that. And we've verbally made that commitment to act.
I don't.
I think
There was no vote Monday night because it wasn't on our agenda. But we talked about it, and I think that we're all going to be men of our words.
I think there's also been a bit of misunderstanding on the quote commitments that we made and what it takes to fulfill a quote commitment. Does a commitment mean you're going to progress down this way and actually do it? Or does a commitment mean you're going to try as best you can, and if it's beyond your authority, you can't really do very much about it? And you know, it's interesting if you look at our motion that you're talking about rescinding. What it says is, we hereby provide the commitment, and in doing so, we fully fulfilled the obligations in it, and we are hereby authorized to tear down Sims. Because if we didn't say that, we wouldn't be able to tear down Sims until we actually had the plant up and running. So what we did is we committed to pursuing that. And in essence, that gave us the permission to shut down Sims. I don't really believe, I mean, we can go through this exercise, but no one can question our resolve, all right, or our commitment to do everything we could to live up to that resolution in the last 2.5 years. And quite frankly, if somebody came back today and said, geez, you didn't live up to your commitment from that resolution, I would argue, yes, we did. And we are now, we don't have to rescind it. We don't have to do anything. We committed to do it. We tried to do it. And in the process, everybody changed their mind, council and board included. So I think it is a housekeeping measure. It shows the the public, that both the board and the council are committed to doing this. But I think if you ask your attorneys, I don't think it's really required to do what we're doing. There was a commitment made. There wasn't a guarantee that we would actually do it. So there's one other thing before you hit that gavel down. If Bob, if you have anything else to say, I didn't want to interrupt you.
I was done.
Okay.
I was just gonna remind them, based on what you just said, I think it is important for council to act.
Yeah,
Whether you do or not our business.
The September, I just want to have this, you put this date on our calendar. We are actually approaching a fairly significant milestone. All right. And on September 29, our utility marks 125 years of service to our community. All right. And if nothing else, I would like to have the community come behind our utility for all that it has accomplished in that period, particularly the last 5 years. All right. Given all of the stuff that's been said about our utility over the last year, I would encourage everyone in the community to look at the successes that we've achieved as a community together. And I would implore you all, as your general manager, to quit throwing frickin' rocks and start productively moving this utility forward. And if that means having a committee formed to look at new generation, I'm not optimistic that that's going to occur, but I'll support it 100%. All right. But what we can do on the 29th is we can celebrate all of the good things that this utility has done for the community. And you know what? That has been lost on all of your employees over the last year. So if you want to know what this beating up of the BLP has been doing in the last year, look at your employees, myself included. And I ask you guys to come behind and celebrate our achievements, because you know what? I've been here 6 years now, and we have a pretty dang good record, all right? And I would love to celebrate it with the community.
I have one last question. Earlier this year, Eric made application for a clean air permit.
Yes.
What happens to that?
Okay,
now?
so
what is the process? on
interesting
that?
question, because actually that process started in February.
Oh,
right?
okay, I'm sorry.
Started in February when we were going forward, and actually what our bond consultants have said is you can't sell bonds until you have an air permit. All right. So we were progressing down the path of getting an air permit in November. That was why we waited from July 31 to November to sell bonds, because we needed that air permit. So we filed the air permit, or what the public may want to know is it's administratively complete. We have filed the air permit, and the particular project that we have filed for meets all of the air emission standards, all of them. All right, but they're required to go before the public and get their input. So today, that project was just noticed. All right, so I got a bunch of notices, I'm sure everybody else did, that said that the public comment period on our air permit is out for comment. At this point in time, obviously, we're electing to not move forward. At some point in time, I would suggest that permit is going to appropriately be removed, but we are in the middle of that process. So unless if there's an outcry from the community, which I don't think there's going to be, to say, well, keep that air permit active until, because we might want to do that in the next year or 2 years. We have no desires to go through a public comment period, and I think we need to talk about that probably at our next meeting of whether or not we want to. But I think there's a meeting scheduled. I don't think it's till September 23 or
22nd.
22nd that would allow for public comment. I don't think you're going to get much public comment if we're proceeding down the path of rescinding our application. But if somebody thinks we're trying to pull a fast one here or something, they're more than willing to file their comments on the air permit and voice their disapproval to it. When I say potential, I am meaning that we are not, as we were told earlier, it doesn't mean we're trying to pull fast one or go around the community and do something. We are proceeding down this path, but at this point in time, it's only potential that we revise the bonds and we make all these changes and everybody approves them. So we're progressing down that path. I have every intention of continuing to do it, but at the same token, at this point in time, that air permit is active.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Chairman Smith. And that was the question I had, again, with the I'm a very linear thinker. And so I was thinking that at the next council meeting, council will be rescinding Resolution 18308, which dealt with the closing of the Sims plant from 3 years ago. And then your next board meeting is on Thursday, September 16th, which is then 4 days before the council meeting, where they would then be acting upon the activities taking place here. So sequentially, it works out nicely that you can meet again before council makes their final decisions or their actions. Our question with regard to the air permit issue was that, again, notification was made to all of those who attended the virtual Zoom meeting that Eagle had last month. So all of those participants, about 75 of them, received notification that the public comment period for the air permit started yesterday and goes for 45 days. And Eagle is planning to have a virtual meeting on September 22nd, which is then after the council meeting. So if the Board of Light and Power is in fact not moving forward with the construction of the power plant, then a lot of people will be spending a lot of time between now and the 22nd soliciting legal opinions and taking the time to fill out their opinions. And also Eagle's staff will be gearing up for this virtual town meeting, which in fact may be moot if in fact you aren't building. And so I would ask that the board just take a formal position and request staff remove or rescind the permit so that Eagle's staff isn't going to be gearing up for their virtual meeting 2 days after City Council has their meeting. And by doing so, it is then also a definitive statement to the community that you in fact are not going to be building the plant, because again, without the plant, there is no way that construction could ever commence. So perhaps
I had a discussion with the mayor and the staff has about all of this timing. So we're aware of it and we're trying to fit everything in properly.
Okay.
I mean, I don't disagree with your whole analysis, and I appreciate you coming up and saying it. But the problem is at this point in time, we don't have any resolution from council, and we really don't have any formal resolution from this board that this is the process that we're going under. So I think I think it's totally inappropriate at this point in time to ask the board to rescind an air permit. Now, if you don't want to spend any time, I wouldn't spend any time on this. I mean, I'm pretty confident that in the direction that we're headed here, and I think you can ask any council member that they're probably pretty confident. I mean, you've got several of them right here. But at this point in time, I don't think it's appropriate for this board, and Eagle has already done all of their work. They have already reviewed this. They aren't spending any more time other than putting together a public comment period. They've, in essence, approved of the permit.
Sure.
All right. So they are,
unless they're exacerbating,
unless if there is something that is brought up by the community. So what they're doing now is they're noticing it. If somebody wants to come in and say how, bad this particular facility was or whatever. But I think you can be assured that they've pretty much already told us that we have agreed to every condition that they have put on us. So they're saying this is ready for your comment. If we don't hear anything in the next, 45 days,
Right.
then they're going to approve of it. I mean, that's really what they're telling the public. Now, that doesn't mean that they're not listening to you or anything else. It just means that they've looked at it, they reviewed it, they made their comments, they made their suggestions to us, we accepted them, and now they're going to you all as public and asking for your comments. Now, if you want to submit comments, you're entirely, it probably is appropriate to submit them, but I wouldn't hire any attorneys or anything at this point in time, or spend a lot of money without talking to the rest of these guys.
Sure.
But
Because in the resolution that was passed for.
Yeah.
Sure. Fair
That's
enough.
good.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Have a motion to adjourn.
I second.
All in favor, say aye.
Recording stopped.
Said, recording about to